Hello, everybody. Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Please remember to like and subscribe. Subscribe if you love the mighty Villa, you want us to win the Champions League, and if you don't, that means you support Birmingham City. I didn't make those rules. It's just what I've heard on the grapevine. Now, Aston Villa play Bournemouth this weekend, but before we chat about that, quickly got to say, 2 years to the day since the Professor Unai, entered our lives like a light in the wilderness. Like when time stands still in a movie after you see the love of your life, that's kind of how it was when Professor Unai was in that photo with Nassef Sawiris holding up the Aston Villa shirt. At first, I could not believe it. I was, I thought of different managers Villa might be linked with at the time, and when Unai Emery's name was sort of vaguely mentioned, I thought there's just no way he's going to come to Aston Villa at a moment when Villarreal are doing well. They've just been in the Champions League semi-final. They just won the Europa League, and Villa were down close to the relegation zone. Had an awful start to the season. Steven Gerrard had left a somewhat, I would argue, potentially quite a miserable atmosphere, really. He'd made a complete mess of things with Tyrone Mings, stripping him of the captaincy, making things weird. No doubt behind the scenes. Mings is a popular guy. It was unpopular with the fans, and I can only imagine how he went down at the training ground. Puts pressure on McGinn as well, who then takes the captaincy. He's constantly played out of position. So, his form dipped, and then for Unai Emery to come back in and have revitalised every single player to started his campaign with Aston Villa with an immediate 3-1 win at home against Manchester United, our first defeat of Man United in 27 years at Villa Park. I mean, that just sums up what a complete embarrassment Aston Villa have been to the name and what we should be in the last 20 to 30 years. We have not lived up to what we should be. We won two trophies in the 90s, the last one in 96. We've come close a lot of times, but too often we've been a little bit like the lads, it's Tottenham sort of mentality of Man United turn up, the beat us, Arsenal turn up, the beat us. And in recent years, that has really begun to change. And finally, a team like Aston Villa in one of the greatest cities in the world, of Birmingham, second biggest city in the country, there's no reason the cities of Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle really should have teams that are anywhere bigger than what Aston Villa should be. And there's no reason from our history, from the size of the fan base, from what we have about us, that we can't be a team that can compete right at the very, very top. And I've argued for a long time, it's been that you look at Man United, you look at Liverpool, and they have had iconic, talismanic managers who have come into those clubs and raised them to a level that turns them into winners. They are transformational, inspiring characters like you would get in politics with someone like a Barack Obama or whoever. You look at Liverpool, Shankly, Bob Paisley, Jurgen Klopp more recently. You could argue Gerard Houllier was that at one point as well. And then you look at Man United, Sir Matt Busby, Sir Alex Ferguson, and they're still trying to find that replacement for Ferguson. It's really hard to find those managers. And Aston Villa, I think, probably since Ron Saunders, haven't really been able to find anyone who can reach that level. Saunders was the one. I think Graham Taylor came very close. Love Graham Taylor, what he did at Villa. But otherwise, O'Neill came quite close. Ron Atkinson got a second in the Premier League, won us the Coca-Cola Cup. So you could argue he did a great job with us. Brian Little won us the 96 Coca-Cola Cup. But there was none of them were able to get us to the very, very highest levels, competing regularly in stuff like the Champions League, or competing for Premier League titles on the regular, or competing for FA Cups on the regular. And Unai Emery coming in, a man who's won 4 Europa Leagues, a man who's got Villarreal to a Champions League semi-final. You cannot help but look at what he's done in the last 2 years at Aston Villa and feel like this is the talismanic manager I have been searching for my entire life, and Aston Villa have been searching for probably since Ron Saunders walked out the door just before the European Cup final in 1982. Genuinely, what he's done at Villa is incredible. The memories already, the 3-1 win over United, watching Aston Villa transform into a team who retain the ball at the back, who are patient, who play in such a modern style. And you remember at the start when I was at Villa Park and I had people around me, like it was like being 11 years old again, playing on full size bloody man's pitches when I was 10. I mean, what the hell was that all about? idiotic. But people around me screaming for Mings to get the ball long, for Conte to get it away, stop passing around at the back. And Unai Emery has transformed that. And I think the fan base itself has probably learned a lot about football just from what Unai Emery's done. And, I was fortunate enough to watch La Liga from the year 2000 right through to when it was on Sky to sort of 2015-16 period. And I watched a lot of teams who play like that. And to see Aston Villa do it, there's a reason Spanish clubs have been so successful in Europe for the last 20, 30 years. The reason they've dominated it is because they play a very quite a patient technical style that seems to just catch people out on the regular and as well as being physical and strong and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I think what Unai Emery's done at Villa is absolutely remarkable, and the memories he's given us already. The Bayern Munich win, one of the greatest night, maybe the best night ever I've ever had at Villa Park. Playing Champions League football, being top of the Champions League table right now, beating Bologna. Uh, or constant comebacks, battering Newcastle 3-0, battering Brighton 6-1, the Man City Arsenal 1-0 back-to-back wins, a 2-0 away at Arsenal. Just endless results, endless hoodoos that he's won, going to places like West Ham where we never win. And so then we win there now, going to Fulham, another place where we've had a tough time for years. Go there and we win 3-1 quite comfortably against a really tough team. Tottenham away, where we've won twice under Unai Emery. Go make London ours. We're going away to games that you're just like, Villa don't do this, but we do. We do. This is what we are now. He's transformed us into something very, very special. And, I said it the other day and I'll say it again. We've had some great moments under Unai Emery, but the best is yet to come. He signed on till 2029, very early days in his spell with us. Whatever happens with us in the Champions League this season, just think of what that is as a building block for Villa. The Conference League was a building block. The wins we had in the Conference League, the tough fixture against Lille, who've done really well in the Champions League already, beating Real Madrid, beating Atletico Madrid the other day. Those tough experiences and getting through that in penalties, losing to Olympiacos, that all builds up. So this season we go away to Young Boys in the Champions League, and it doesn't feel like it's alien to us to go away. So we go there and we comfortably win. We play Bayern Munich again. It doesn't feel alien, that they're the final boss of football, really. Them and Real Madrid, I guess, and Barcelona. And we win that game. And again, that's such a building block. It's something you think, right? We've done this against Bayern Munich. We've done this against Lille on penalties. We've beaten various, teams like Bologna and Young Boys in the Champions League. This is what we're capable of. This is who we are. We have an authority about us now, and it's Professor Unai talks about maturity, and I think that's the perfect description. It's Aston Villa maturing as a team and going from one that there's things we can still improve on. We need to stop conceding stupid early goals all the time, but it's just the way we can mature and take control of a game like we did against Bologna, like we did against Bayern and Young Boys, and what that means for the future. In 2 to 3 years' time, it's really exciting stuff, and the best is yet to come. Dare to dream of what we can do. Winning leagues, winning Champions League, winning Europa League, all these trophies now that felt like a pipe dream throughout my entire life now feel like something that is very, very plausible, genuinely. If Tottenham got to a Champions League final, why can't Villa? If Atletico Madrid won La Liga multiple times, given where they were in the year 2009 to 2010, they've got to multiple Champions League finals again. Believe. Very exciting stuff. Thank you, Professor Unai, for 2 of the best years of my life as a football fan. Now, Bournemouth. That's the next test. Now, come on, let's get to the tactical pad, shall we? Now, as I always say, I'll try and make this as accessible as possible for everybody who's listening on Spotify and Apple or wherever. Please like and subscribe on there. Please follow us. Please give us nice reviews if you like what we do. Honestly, it helps so much. Those 5-star reviews on Spotify, I tell you, and on Apple, I tell you, it massively helps. Anyway, had to get that in there, didn't I? Get a bit of a cheap plug. Sorry about that. But if you're on YouTube, you can see the screen. Got the tactical palette. You can see the teams. So with Villa, well, it's hard to predict Villa. I mean, the squad depth is so much right now that it's hard to say really, like who's going to start what games. But what I do think is that Professor Unai is going to balance up the minutes. And so I wouldn't be surprised if, say, we play Club Bruges in, away in a couple of weeks. Duran starts again in that game. Matson starts again in that game. Maybe Boubacar Kamara starts in that game. And then because with that sandwich between Liverpool away and Tottenham away, so maybe you go Onana starts the Tottenham game, starts the Liverpool game. The options are very exciting. But I think I've just gone with Luca Dean as the left back in this game. So Matson played the full 90 against um, Bologna. So again, he could come on in this game for a bit. But I think Luca Dean probably starts because I just have a feeling Semenyo is the one that we'll be keeping an eye on. I'll talk a bit more about Semenyo, Antoine Semenyo, in a little bit. I think he's a fantastic player, Semenyo. I really think his ceiling is really, really high. So I'm just going to say Semenyo, Luca Dean's on there for the more defensively stout display against Semenyo. Pau Torres, and I've gone with Ezri Konsa just because I think Diego Carlos, he played midweek and he played at the weekend as well, didn't he, against Fulham? Uh, he does seem to be a player that you need to balance minutes up a little bit with, just injury wise, because he does pick up those little nagging strains and pulls, doesn't he? So I have a feeling Konsa might start centre back, and I'm going to say Matty Cash comes back in at right back. That's just what I'm theorising. But as I say, it's really difficult to call with Villa at the moment, just the sheer weight of numbers we have. Now, I've gone with Onana and Tielemans as the two centre mids because, why change a sailing ship? But what I would say as well is that Onana did pick up a knock, didn't he, against Bologna? So would Kamara start? I think it's a little early for Kamara to be starting. I think you want to work him in and get minutes, and then I think he maybe starts against Crystal Palace in Carabao Cup next week. But if Onana is fit, I think he starts. But if he doesn't, maybe McGinn goes back into that role alongside Tielemans. And then we put Jacob Ramsey onto the left midfield role. And I've just said that I think McGinn starts. I just feel like Emery likes starting McGinn. I think he just does. I think McGinn is a quality player. He had a fantastic game against uh, Bologna the other night. And I think Watkins comes back in for Duran. And I think Duran starts against Palace. Watkins comes back in for Tottenham, and I think Duran starts against Bruges. Is how I think it works. Rodgers starts. I think Rodgers is the one man who just doesn't seem to come out of the team at all, does he? Now I've gone with Leon Bailey on the right. I think if Philogene wasn't suspended after the red card he got at Fulham, I think Bailey would. I think Philogene would have a good chance of starting because defensively he's really good. He'd be good at stopping Kirkez, who likes to come forward. Instead, I think it'd be Bailey. We want him to find his form again soon, don't we? Now, I said McGinn might go back alongside Tielemans if Onana's not fit. Of course, I've just ignored Ross Barkley there, haven't I? So look, it could well be the case that Barkley comes in. These are the options Aston Villa have. This is how sport for choice we are. It's great. But then with Bournemouth, I've just gone with the team they had against Arsenal that won 2-0 the other day. Araujo right back, Zabani and Senesi centre backs. Kirkez as the left back, Kepa in goal, of course. Lewis Cook and Alex Scott in as two DMs in the 4-2-3-1 they like to play. Tavernier in playing off the Evan Ilson as the striker. Ouattara out left and Semenyo out right. Semenyo, though, can play either side, and I think Ouattara can as well, actually. Justin Kluivert could start. He's started really well this season. He scored the penalty as well against Arsenal the other day. And I think last season when we beat them 3-1 back in, I think it was April, so quite recently, Justin Kluivert started out on the left for them, and he caused us quite a lot of problems early on in that game. Now, what I would say, looking back on that game, is that Villa won 3-1. And there's a few things I'm going to point out from that game that I think might come again in this game. But I do remember in that game that Villa, we looked knackered at that point in the season. Europe, I think, had really caught up with us, and the injury crisis we had really started to catch up. It was a really crucial win, actually, a very important point. But I do remember Bournemouth starting that game very intense, and I think Villa struggled to get going really for the first 20 minutes, but spaces opened and Villa exploited them. So I'll talk about that in a sec. But let's just have a quick look at Bournemouth's form. So they're in 11th in the Premier League, solidly mid-table. They've scored 10 goals and they've conceded 10 goals. So that's about as mid-table as you get, really, isn't it? They've just beaten Arsenal 2-0, sorry. Great result. Although Arsenal obviously went down to 10, Saliba got sent off. So you could argue Um, they beat 10 men, but at the same time, you still have to beat them, don't you? So great result. Recent away form, they lost at Leicester 1-0. They were really poor in the first half of that game, but second half, they really came alive and really should have scored. They had a few chances, hit the bar a couple of times, all that. They lost at Liverpool recently as well, 3-0. And also recently, another recent away game. They were 2-0 down against Everton and came back and won 3-2 in a very infamous result of Goodison in the last sort of 5 minutes of the entire game. Amazing. Now, I'm just going to quote from a Sky Sports interview actually that Iraola did with them. So Iraola, obviously the manager of Bournemouth. I love Bournemouth. I love watching them. I think they're a really harder, faster, stronger. Is how I describe them. They're really intense, high press, push hard against you type of team. And it reminds me of a bit of Bielsa, who was recently at Leeds United, a little bit of that. And it takes me back to, as I mentioned earlier, I used to watch La Liga a lot. I remember Pep Guardiola's Barcelona. I used to watch them every single week because I still think to this day, now with Unai Emery's Villa, it's a tighter thing, but I think they're the best team I've ever seen in my life, Guardiola's Barcelona. And I remember one game they played away at Bilbao, which is still to this day one of my favourite ever football matches to watch, was when it was pouring with rain for 90 minutes. And it was around about 2012, I think. And Bill Athletic just went man for man. And Iraola obviously played for that Athletic club with Bielsa as manager. And they just went man for man with Barcelona, who and it was such an intense game under that rain. You just thought, how the hell does anyone deal with this? And it just showed you the quality of Barcelona that were able to cope with it in those conditions, in that atmosphere, with the team pressing them non-stop. But it also shows you kind of the strengths and weaknesses of that approach in the sense of you can really unsettle a team, particularly at home, I think. And I think you can really smash a team every now and again. But one of the issues is that sometimes if you go away from home and you play on a bigger pitch, I think that intense approach can actually lead to lots of spaces opening up. And we saw that with Leeds at Villa Park a couple of times. And I think we saw it with Bournemouth last season. And I'll talk about that more in a second. But now, I'll just quote Iraola here from the Sky Sports interview. And the subheading is quick and direct attacks, which sums it up really, doesn't it? Now, Sky said, while some Premier League sides favour slow, methodical approach play, which is sort of Villa, really, we're a bit more methodical, aren't we? Bournemouth are unashamedly direct. Opta's advanced metrics show they attack at a higher speed than any other team in the division. Transitions are targeted as moments of opportunity. Now, they quote Iraola here, who says, the first thing we try to do when we recover the ball is play to the number 9, because that is usually the moment when the opponent is less well positioned and you can find better spaces. Now, last season, obviously, they had Dominic Solanke, who likes to run channels, come out wide, hold the ball up centrally as well. Solanke's super, super forward for them last year and really came alive and scored loads and loads of goal for them. This season now they've got Evan Nilsson, who's a different type of player. He started with 1 goal. If you look at his FBref stats, it's all green. He looks great. He did well at Porto last season. If I look at his stats last season, he scored 13 goals in 27 league games, 4 assists. In the Champions League, got 4 goals, 1 assist in 7 games. So a really key player for Porto. £40 million signing. He's got 1 goal. It was a brilliant finish against Southampton. But you do have to think it's going to be a transition for him and a transition for Bournemouth to get used to how he plays. And I think we're slightly seeing that at the moment with Bournemouth this season. So I would imagine let's give them another month, and I bet they go on a really good run. Once the whole thing with Evan Nilsson works itself out. But for now, it feels like it's still a little bit of a work in progress, I think. Now, again, I'm just going to sort of quote the Sky Sports interview. Bournemouth's wastefulness in front of goal this season is, after all, a collective issue. According to Opta, they have scored roughly 4 goals fewer than they should have based on the quality of chances they have created. Iraola is trying to change attitudes, and I think that therefore refers maybe to how they work with Evan Nilsson, how Evan Nilsson works with them. I do remember this being an issue for Bournemouth, particularly in the first half of last season. I remember studying them and talking about them at the start of last season, and it been a case that Bournemouth started last season really poorly. I think they didn't win in 8 or 9 games, and then eventually it all clicked and they really came alive and were a super team. But I think that last season, particularly in the opening half, they really weren't taking their chances. Eventually, when Solanke started taking them chances, Bournemouth really came alive. And I think it might be a similar case with Bournemouth this season where they might be waiting for Evan Nilsson to just start scoring. He got one goal against Southampton, super finish, and he won a penalty against Arsenal the other day. And I think had he not been taken down by David Raya, he had an open goal and he'd probably have scored. So it feels like those goals maybe are going to start coming soon enough. Um, anyway, so yeah, if you're to look at their most dangerous players, I think for me it's got to be this guy in it. It's Antoine Semenyo. Every single time I see him play, I just think he looks he looks like a potential world beater. He's 24 years of age. Last season, um, I mean, this season he's played 8 games, 3 goals and 1 assist. Last season he got 8 goals and 2 assists. So already it feels like he's going to beat those numbers from last year. So it shows a sign of progression. For Bournemouth this season, he's got the most progressive carries with 25. Second is Milos Kerkez on 23. I'll talk about him in a second. And most progressive passes received by far is Semenyo with 61. So, when Bournemouth are playing from deep or when they win the ball and try to beat a team on transition, the man it seems to be that they're hitting the most at the moment is Antoine Semenyo. And he's big, he's tall, he's skillful, he's got the lot. He's really, really good. And that's why I do think Luca Dean, as the defensively stout fullback that we have, is probably the one to go up against Semenyo this weekend. Now, another player I just mentioned there, Milos Kerkez. Now, I kind of wish we had Philogene for this game, just because I think defensively, um, Philogene is a player who would track him, stop him from trying to play. Because against Arsenal, Kirk has had the most progressive carries. So he's a player trying to make things happen, taking it down the wing. And 5 of those carries were into the final third. So he's a very progressive for he's a very progressive fullback. He gets forward round here. And so Leon Bailey's going to have to do his defensive duties at time this weekend and pull back. But what you would also hope is that, Leon Bailey did show signs early on against Bologna that he had a bit more sharpness than he's shown in recent weeks. But then he sort of fell back into it, looking a bit like things are in his head at the moment. He's not confident at taking players on. But eventually for him, it will click, I think. It'd be nice if it starts this weekend. And if he can pin Kirkes back with some of his attacking play, with his skills and attacking play, then hopefully that could be a good way of preventing Kirkes from breaking forward all the time. But look, last season, if you look at it, Justin Kluivert here had the ball, pulls it back to Kirkes who overlapped him. Matty Cash brought him down for a penalty, from which Zielinski scored. So there you see Aston Villa have learnt themselves from what Kirkes can do breaking forward when, let's say, a Ouattara or Kluivert come inside and hit that ball down the left for an overlapping run. So with Cash, it's quite funny. Penalty, Cash, I mean, he's a rash player, isn't he? He does give penalties away. So that's something he really needs to get out of his game. I think if you look at a good example of what they do, winning the ball high back up, like look at this. You've got Ouattara. I think it was Ouattara. Anyway, they won the ball high up in their own final third against Arsenal. I'm just going to say it's Ouattara. Got into the final third, hits the ball across to Semenyo, and Semenyo hits it over the crossbar. So Semenyo really should have scored from that chance. But again, I think that's just a little example of what they can do when they win the ball back high up. And we also saw it last season against Aston Villa. Now, their opening goal. Look at this. Moussa Diaby got the ball back to goal. And it was the Bournemouth defender. I want to say it was Ryan Christie won the ball back here. He breaks forward, sends the ball into Kluivert. And as I mentioned, Kluivert sends the ball over to Kirkes and they get the penalty from that. So that's an example of, against Arsenal and Aston Villa, of Bournemouth being a very aggressive, intense team, winning the ball back high up and just hitting you when you're kind of unsettled and sort of a little bit out of position. So that's just something I think to bear in mind. But now, first, I'm just going to look at their more recent game they had against Liverpool. There were lots of occasions where I think Luis Diaz caused Araujo at right back quite a lot of problems, and I think that's partly because Luis Diaz, I think, is one of the players of the season so far. He's been fantastic. But if you look here, their first goal, look at the space Liverpool have here. Now, Liverpool clearly have won the ball back when Bournemouth have been trying to attack. Where's the midfield? I mean, it's basically it's 5-on-4, really, isn't it? Kind of unbelievable, really. And eventually, the ball works its way out to Luis Diaz. When the Rauho's been dragged inside, don't really know why he's left Luis Diaz with that much space. Diaz takes it inside and buries it. Similar thing again. Look at that. Four defenders. Bournemouth have clearly been caught high up again. Ball comes into uh, Darwin Nunez, who gets it, runs down the side, cuts back inside, and whips an absolutely incredible finish to make it. I think it was 3-0 in the end that game. So, you are seeing some of their vulnerabilities, but what I would say as well, just aside from that, is that their set pieces seem to be good this season. If we look at the Arsenal game, they opened the scoring. I think it was through Christie, just a low corner into a player who'd run towards the corner taker. He knocks it on, and a lovely finish into the top corner. Great stuff. And against Leicester, they hit the crossbar a couple of times. They had one goal disallowed from a set piece that went directly in, and then another set piece that led to them hitting the crossbar. So that's just an example of recent games where the set pieces have caused problems. But also where I talk about the space that they can leave. And, I'll bring it back to the Villa game in April. Look at this. Aston Villa we were 1-0 down at this point, won the ball back, and we went at Bournemouth. And it looks to me like there's just a lot of space there for Leon Bailey to work into. I hit a brilliant pass out to Morgan Rogers. Rogers, who found an acre of space out on Bournemouth's right. He takes it into the area, cuts back, and a great finish. It was superb stuff from Morgan Rogers. Now, the second goal, I think, is an even better example of what can happen here. Villa won the ball back in our defensive third. Pau Torres hits the ball into Morgan Rogers, who'd come into that pocket between the two midfielders and the four defenders. Now, again, it's a case of Bournemouth being hyper aggressive, and you think what it can leave is spaces, and we found that here. Villa found space. Morgan Rogers, I think he's going to be key again. If Bournemouth have the exact same approach, it's going to be all about Rogers coming into pockets and finding space and just whipping it in behind for an Ollie Watkins or a Duran or Bailey or whoever it is who's making the runs in behind. Now, Rogers hit it in behind to Ollie Watkins, who cut inside, lovely pass into Moussa Diaby, goal. And it's, just shows what you can do on transition to Bournemouth as well. And look at that. I think at a wider angle of it, you can see just how much space there is for Villa to play into and how much space Rodgers had found. And I think, Jacob Ramsey is another player who you think can cause a lot of problems in that way. I talked about it the other week, Villa's stampede. I include Matson, Watkins, Duran, Rogers, Bailey. They're all players who really can, if you give them space, can really smash you into that space. And it's almost like a stampede. Like Mufasa in The Lion King looking on, his pupils dilate, unable to believe what he's seeing. It's similar for opposition defenders that they're having to deal with what Villa can do to you with that stampede. And then again, Villa showing what we can do. Watkins, that third goal against Bournemouth last season, he won the ball high up. Won the back to goal. Rolled, I think it was Zabani, I think it was, he rolled. And then, works his way up the pitch, cross into the area, and Bailey scores. So obviously it's not going to be an identical game to last season, but I think there probably are rhythms that you can see. Evan Nilsson's obviously a very different player to Solanke. So, Evan Nilsson's going to be a bit of a lesson for us. We might see him do a few things that we're not quite expecting. And, as I say, I think Bournemouth opened up against Villa. They were really hard, fast, strong in that first 20 minutes against us last season. I think we struggled to adapt to it. partly because I think the volume of games at that point, the injury crisis had caught up with us, but also, you know, they'll try and do something similar this weekend, I would imagine, given the fact that we've just had a midweek game, a big tough Champions League game, lots of mental and physical energy used to get through it. And so I think Bournemouth again might try and hit us hard, fast, strong. They've got players centrally like Alex Scott. He's a nice technical defensive midfielder. At Leicester, he recorded 10 progressive passes, the most in the team. He completed 19 out of the 20 passes he attempted as well. So he's again a key game play, a key playmaker in centrally, and that's a player that I think we're going to have to try and disrupt a bit and try and prevent him from really imposing himself centrally on the game. But what you can also say is that if Aston Villa do find space, you got to think that with the sort of the stampede type players we have, with players like Rodgers coming into the pockets, like Yuri Tielemans looking to make things happen from deep, hitting space, passes into space from deep. You got to think Aston Villa can do a lot of damage to Bournemouth, but in the same way, Bournemouth have the players to do a lot of damage to Aston Villa as well. That's not underestimating them in any way whatsoever. But look, yes, harder, faster, stronger. Bournemouth are a really intense team. I love watching them. I think they're a really, really good side. They've conceded a fair amount this season, but they've scored a fair amount. In Aston Villa, we've conceded early on. This is something we have to get the habit out of doing, and hopefully, last season, Bournemouth away, I do remember Diego Carlos passed it straight into their centre midfielder. He got it to Semenyo, and Semenyo scored. That's something we've been caught out with against Bournemouth before with their high press. Something we've got to prevent ourselves from doing. Maybe just soak up the pressure in the first 20 minutes. Because they probably will just be a bit more higher energy than we will as we set ourselves into the game. But as the game progresses and Aston Villa tries to take a bit more possession with our ball players, and players like Rodgers finding that space, you got to think we can do a lot of damage. So yes, can't wait. I'm going to be there. Please like and subscribe. Up the mighty Villa.